Hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our webinar this afternoon. We are so excited to talk to you about something very, very special today, America's top 5 recommended rail holidays. Some amazing journeys through the USA with Amtrak. We're really, really excited with the turnout today. We've got so many of you online listening with us, and we're really excited to share these with you. You can see on the screen, my name is Sarah Turner, and I work in the marketing department here at Railbookers. You will also be able to see that we have got a special Christmas offer today, now that it is the 1st of December. 2 lucky people will win £50 off their next rail holiday with us. And of course, as always, absolutely everyone who stays with us today is going to get special attendee discount. So I'd love to just take a few minutes of your time today to chat with you about why Railbookers. Of course, I'm sure you already know, we are the rail experts. We've got an absolutely amazing team of self-confessed train geeks here who love putting together these itineraries for you and really do love talking about all the holidays that we offer and planning your perfect trip. And what they're going to do is use our insider access. We have great relationships with the train companies, hotels across the world, which we use to obviously get you the best rates, but also they mean that you can book your holiday even if tickets aren't available to the public yet. And that, you know, really is the flexibility of it. We want to make it completely easy for you so that you know that you're getting the best from us, and all you have to do is to tell us the details. We'll sort everything because we know how complicated it can be. We want to make it hassle-free for all of you. And of course, we are an award-winning operator as well. So we're very excited last week to win in 2 categories in the British Travel Awards, including for the best rail company as well. So that's very, very exciting. Who are we? Well, we're Railbookers. We organise trips by rail across Europe, across the USA, which we'll see some of today, and of course Canada as well, but far beyond that. Really exciting holiday types, from scenic rail journeys, which we'll definitely get into today, but also shorter. If you don't have quite as long, we can arrange city breaks. You'll be really surprised at how far you can go with rail travel, how quickly. We also specialise in luxury and private train journeys. Things like the Venice Sample and Orient Express are always really popular, as are our rail and sail options. If you're a bit of a cruise fanatic, why not add on a cruise to the beginning or the end of your trip by train? Lakes and mountains holidays, obviously that will evoke images of Europe, but can really be true in America and Canada, of course, as well. And those coast-to-coast USA and Canada journeys, really, really popular options at the moment if you're looking for a bit of an epic adventure by train. So some of our top destinations you can see on your screen: Scandinavia, Italy, Switzerland and Germany on the Europe side of things, but also, of course, the USA, which we know you're really excited to learn about, and we're really excited to talk to you guys about too. A couple of our top itineraries you can see: Cologne and Berlin. We spoke earlier, very briefly, I touched on the Venice Sample and Orient Express. You can see that amazing train there. Madrid and Andalusia, if maybe you're thinking about your summer holiday for next year, now the weather is bitterly cold and you're craving a bit of sunshine. We also offer Italian lakes via the Alps, really making the journey part of the experience, part of the holiday, to get down to Lake Garda, Lake Como maybe. The Glacier and Bermuda Express, you can see a picture of that amazing panoramic train there, and Canada coast to coast, really one of the best experiences by rail that you could possibly do anywhere in the world. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen there, you'll see our phone number. So just jot that down if you've got a pen and paper to hand: 0203 780 2382. You can give us a call whenever you're ready to talk about your holiday plans. And if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, please let us know. Just ask us. You should see a box to the right, perhaps, of your screen. Pop any questions that you have in there. We'll get around to answering some at the end of the presentation. We do get a lot of questions, so if we don't get around to answering yours, never fear. we will send you a message or get in touch with you after the webinar, so your questions will all be answered. And all that's left from me now is to pass over to our guest speaker today. It's Colleen McCarthy, the operations manager in our Boston office. She is, of course, an American local, and she knows these Amtrak routes. She's traveled all over the country. There is no safer pair of hands to talk to you about America's best rail journeys. So without much further ado, Colleen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, and thank you to everybody listening. I am extremely excited to have the opportunity to talk to you folks today about one of my favorite activities, which is, of course, traveling by rail. I would also be considered a self-confessed train geek, I think, in Sarah's description. And as Sarah mentioned, I have been very lucky to have traveled all over the USA by rail on Amtrak, which is our rail system here in the U.S. Now, Amtrak does connect basically all of the USA. It connects 46 of the 48 continuous United States, and you can really go anywhere on Amtrak. So I'm going to start the little presentation today with one of my very favorite trips that we do here with Railbookers in the USA, which is our Music Cities of America trip. I actually just got back from this almost a year ago now. Last fall, I traveled from Nashville to Memphis to New Orleans on our Music Cities of America trip, and we can offer that for you today. This is a 10-day trip visiting 3 of the most famous music cities here in the U.S., starting with Memphis. So anyone who is an Elvis fan will be very excited. Our trip does include a trip out to Graceland, which is, of course, Elvis's mansion there in Memphis. We then have you drive on over to Nashville, very easy, quick drive there. And Nashville, of course, is the home of country music, the Ryman Auditorium, the Grand Ole Opry, and Country Music Hall of Fame, of course, in Nashville as well. But even if you're not a huge country music person, Nashville's main street there has so many different music venues, so many different types of music and different things you can do there in Nashville. It's really a fun and exciting city to visit anytime. We then have you travel down to New Orleans on Amtrak's very famous City of New Orleans train. There's even a song about it, you may have heard. A very lovely trip, actually, on the City of New Orleans, particularly as you go into Louisiana. You start going through some of the bayou area on board the train, and there's some great shots you can take from the Amtrak train there before you arrive in the Big Easy, where we have you spend 3 nights in New Orleans, which is an amazing place to visit. Of course, the French Quarter is the most famous part of New Orleans. As you can see there, we've got some, fantastic jazz music available to you. Basically, every place in New Orleans opens up its doors in the evening and has live music. You can just stroll down the street, pop in, and hear all the different kinds of music there. It's really a fantastic opportunity. And one of the great things about traveling on Amtrak, you guys, is that Amtrak has such centrally located stations. So they're right downtown. The Amtrak station is less than a mile from the French Quarter, very easy. And all of these trips, we include the accommodations for you. So we include the train travel, we include the accommodations, and we include some really neat sightseeing as well. And all of our accommodations are very centrally located. We have you stay in or right next to the French Quarter in New Orleans. You stay right downtown in Memphis, and then in Nashville you've got a couple different choices. You can stay out by Opryland or right downtown again as well. So these are some really great features of a lot of our different trips that I'll go through today. Now this Music Cities trip does include the flights from London to Memphis and then New Orleans back to London at the end, as well as the airport transfers to get you from the airport to your first hotel and back to the airport at the end. Does, of course, include the Amtrak rail travel, 9 nights hotel stay, your car rental to get from Memphis to Nashville, and a couple meals included for you there as well. And as I mentioned, a lot of these trips do include sightseeing. So these are, professionally planned trips by some of our experts here who know, what makes sense and what are the major things that you folks will want to see when you're traveling. So we, of course, include a sightseeing tour of Memphis with admission to Graceland, Elvis's mansion, for you folks when you're there. Of course, we include a sightseeing tour of Nashville as well as admission to the Johnny Cash Museum and a performance at the Grand Ole Opry, not to be missed in Nashville. Even if you're not a country music fan, it's a really special experience. You never know who's going to play at the Opry. That's one of the really fun things about it. They don't announce the schedule until shortly before your show date. And even once they announce it, you can have a special guest star show up. I was lucky enough you're going out to have Merle Haggard show up at the Opry unannounced. He came on just to play one song, and the audience reacted so positively he ended up playing a whole set while he was there, which is really an amazing, amazing, unexpected experience. Of course, in New Orleans, we have sightseeing for you as well. There we have a Power Pass, so you can have admission to many of the different attractions in New Orleans, including swamp boat tour if you want to get out on the water. We do include a walking tour or a battlefield cruise as well on one of the historic paddle boats right down the Mississippi River, which is something not to be missed for sure in New Orleans. Of course, if you folks are interested in more of one of the coast-to-coast itineraries that we have here in the USA, if you've got a little time to spend, we do have this one very popular trip for us, which is called the Great American Majestic Landscapes. It's a 13-day trip starting in New York City. Then you take one night on board the train out to Chicago. Do a couple nights in Chicago, then one night on board the train out to Denver. Now this trip here between Chicago, Denver, and San Francisco is on our California Zephyr train, which is one of the most famous trains on the Amtrak system. I'll get to that in just a minute. And then you travel from Denver to San Francisco before you fly on back to London at the end. The trip, of course, starts here in New York City, the Big Apple, which is truly a city that never sleeps. I know that's sort of the nickname, but it's actually a fact. I can personally attest to that. I think Sarah can as well. Really fun, vibrant, exciting city, New York. Lots to see and do there. Of course, you've got Broadway, the Empire State Building, Statue of Liberty, and much, much more. Then we have you travel overnight on board Amtrak over to Chicago, which is another one of our premier cities here in the USA. We've got some great shopping in Chicago, world-class museums. You can take a cruise on the river, get a deep dish pizza. Can't skip that when you're there in Chicago. And then we have you aboard the California Zephyr train to head out west. So this train, everyone, is considered to be one of the most scenic routes in North America, and some folks will argue it's one of the most scenic routes in the world, this train. It, of course, starts in Chicago and finishes in San Francisco, and in between it goes through the Rocky Mountains, specially designed to be traveling through those mountain vistas in the daytime so that you get the best scenery possible on this train. One of the great things about Amtrak on these long-distance trains is that they do have an observation car on board, so you folks can kick back, relax, and stare out the window. Take pictures, as many as you want. They've got big, comfy chairs. They face floor-to-ceiling windows. You can really, really take in some of the most beautiful scenery in our country. Definitely recommend this train. And it's going to take you out to Denver, which is the perfect place to spend a few nights and do some sightseeing out to Rocky Mountain National Park, which we do include for you with this trip. We actually include the sightseeing tour out to the national park so you can really take in some of those amazing mountain views and vistas on this trip. Before you get back on the train, spend one more night going through some of the great red rock scenery there in Utah, and then coming on into San Francisco, the city by the bay, which is another one of my favorite locations in the U.S. It's just got a really great vibe in San Francisco. Everybody's happy and laid back, and they've got some amazing eclectic restaurants. They've got some fantastic sightseeing, of course, the Golden Gate Bridge, and San Francisco is a great stopping point to visit some of the local Northern California attractions as well, including Napa and Sonoma Valley, which are, of course, famous for their winemaking. So we do include a trip for you out to Napa and Sonoma, including stops at several of the most famous wineries and wine tastings. And, of course, you can let somebody else do the driving on that tour, which is a pretty great opportunity as well. I highly recommend that trip there out to San Francisco. So this trip is called the Great American Majestic Landscapes. You fly from London to New York City and then fly from San Francisco back to London at the end. We do again include those transfers as well as the train travel, your hotel accommodations, a few of the meals are included, and we've got some really great sightseeing activities included for you on this trip, including hop-on, hop-off passes in New York and Chicago. So those hop-on, hop-off passes, everyone, what those are, they're scenic tour buses, which travel around the city, all the different neighborhoods of the city. It's a great way to take in some, the city there, and then you folks can actually get off the bus at whatever attraction interests you. So let's say you get off at the Empire State Building and you want to visit the top. You then get back on the very next bus that comes by, for those of you who aren't familiar with them. It's a really great way to see the city. They're narrated tours while you're on board, and it really gives you the flexibility, as Sarah mentioned, to schedule your tour the way you like it. We also include a City Pass in Chicago, which will get you admission to some of those amazing museums that I mentioned there, as well as the tours out to Napa and Sonoma and Rocky Mountain National Park. Now, as I mentioned, that California Zephyr train goes through some beautiful mountain scenery, but if you think of America and you think more of the Southwest, we do have a great trip for you. This is the Grand Canyon Discovery with Los Angeles trip. It's just a touch longer. It's a 14-day trip. Starts there in Chicago before you take an overnight ride on board Amtrak to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then you visit the Grand Canyon, absolutely one of the wonders of the world there. Spending a couple nights in Flagstaff, which is a really neat little Route 66 era town, before traveling one more overnight on board the train to sunny Los Angeles. So this is another one of my favorite trips. I've done a very similar itinerary myself quite recently, and I have to say it was amazing. Of course, this trip again starts in Chicago. Now, Chicago, fun fact, is actually the home of the Ferris wheel. The very first Ferris wheel was created in Chicago for the World's Fair in 1893, and you guys can use your hop-on, hop-off pass to head out to Navy Pier to see a replica of that Ferris wheel, which still stands today. Following your trip to Chicago, you're going to board Amtrak's Southwest Chief train. Now, this is another beautiful ride, very scenic ride from Chicago out to New Mexico and Arizona. As you can see from the shot here, we've got some amazing desert scenery for you. So I highly recommend eating dinner in the evening as the sun sets over the desert. So you folks will board the train in the afternoon, so you'll have one overnight on the train before you arrive in Santa Fe, New Mexico the following afternoon. And Santa Fe is a really neat little town. We have you stay right in the historic district, right in the heart of the city, and I highly recommend going out to dinner in Santa Fe. They've got some amazing southwestern cuisine there in New Mexico. Absolutely fabulous restaurants on every corner, and a lot of interesting sights to see as well. We do include a walking tour there in Santa Fe, so you can get out and see some of the sights, work off a little bit of that food that you've had before you travel on board the train to the Grand Canyon. So we actually have you take the Amtrak train, everyone, into Williams, Arizona, which is another town actually that was on Route 66. Williams is a really neat little town, some great dining there as well. We have you spend one night there, and then you take the Grand Canyon Railway train, which is about a 2.5-hour ride on an old-fashioned steam engine train up to the Grand Canyon itself. That by itself is a really neat experience. They do like a Wild West cowboy show ahead of time. It's great, especially if you've got any kids or if you're a kid at heart like me. They do a Wild West cowboy show before the train leaves. Then you board the historic steam engine train. They've got guides on board the train. There's a bar car, of course, on the train. And then they've got the cowboys that come through and actually play, She's Been Coming Around the Mountain, and different fun little songs, actually live entertainment on board the train as well. So it's a really neat little experience there, and that's going to drop you off right at the south rim of the Grand Canyon, which, if you've never been, is a must-see. Truly, the pictures really can't do it justice. It's breathtaking, breathtaking scenery there at the Grand Canyon. And we actually, on this trip, have you spend a couple nights inside the national park, so at one of the national park lodges right inside the Grand Canyon, where you can wake up in the morning for sunrise over the canyon, just a couple minutes walk to the canyon rim itself. You can have dinner, overlooking the canyon. It's an amazing place, and we have you stay right there in the heart of it all. before you come on back down to Flagstaff, Arizona. And Flagstaff, like I say, really neat little Route 66 town, and it's the perfect jumping off point to do a day tour to Sedona, which is included in this trip. As I've mentioned, I've been lucky enough to do a trip like this. I've done the Music Cities trip as well, and the Coastal California trip, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But one of my favorite things in all the travels that I've done was our Jeep ride in Sedona. So you go off-roading in a red Jeep. You do rock climbing in the Jeep, and you just get to some amazing places that you really would never be able to see by road. So it's really amazing opportunity there as well. Highly recommend Sedona. So you do your day trip out to Sedona on this trip before we have you come on back to take the Amtrak train to Los Angeles. So overnight train there from Arizona to Los Angeles, so you get another experience doing the overnights on board Amtrak, which are a lot of fun. We'll get to that in a little bit. And then you arrive in sunny LA, where you can see Rodeo Drive, you can see the Hollywood sign, the Hollywood Walk of Fame, you can go shopping, you can see the Stars homes. There's a lot to do there in Los Angeles. As I mentioned, this trip's a 14-day trip. Included is the flight from London and the flight back to London at the end with the airport transfers. And again, we include your rail, your hotel stay, and a couple of different meals for you, as well as some of the great sightseeing opportunities all along the way. So again, you have that hop-on, hop-off in Chicago. You have the walking tour of Santa Fe, the Grand Canyon excursion, and I didn't mention but should have, that we also include a tour of the canyon for you. So once you arrive off the train, there's actually a tour bus waiting to meet you, and you go out with some really fantastic guides there on that tour. Of course, we include that wonderful Jeep tour in Sedona, as well as the hop-on, hop-off in Los Angeles as well. Now, if that trip appealed to you, but the coast-to-coast trip also appealed to you, we've got a perfect combination here. If you've got a little bit more time to spend, we have this trip, which is one of my favorites as well, coast-to-coast across the USA. So this is a 17-day trip where you see New York City, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Williams, Arizona, the Grand Canyon, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. So we've combined some of the best bits of all the trips we've looked at so far into this, excellent 17-day trip where you truly go across the coast of the U.S. and see some of the best cities and the best sites that we have to offer. Starting, of course, in New York City, where you can see Central Park. Again, there's some excellent museums there in New York, and Broadway, one of my favorite places in New York. Definitely recommend that you take in a show. There's some fantastic world-class entertainment there in New York City as well. Before you take our Northeast Regional train, which is a short little train, guys, right on down to Washington, D.C. Very pretty ride, very short, so very convenient for you. You still get the full day of sightseeing in Washington. Washington, D.C., of course, is our nation's capital, and plenty of history there as well. Before you board Amtrak's Capital Limited train, which is quite a nice scenic ride in the Northeast from Washington, D.C. up to Chicago. So you can see the shot here. If you folks happen to come in the fall, we've got some beautiful foliage in this region here in the fall. You can take that Amtrak train overnight to Chicago. And one of the great things to do in Chicago, we do include it in a lot of our trips, is actually an architecture cruise on the Chicago River. Really very neat experience. You can see some of the amazing skyline there, very historic. The very first steel-framed skyscraper was actually built in Chicago. The Willis Tower, which used to be the Sears Tower, was the tallest building in the world for many years. Not so much today, but for many, many years. And they've actually got a great observation deck there that you can visit. So you spend a couple nights in Chicago before we have you board that Southwest Chief train. And as I mentioned, that train does leave Chicago in the afternoon, and it's going to arrive down in Arizona the following evening. So you really get the opportunity to spend some time on board the Amtrak train, which I think is one of the best ways to see America. Clouds look the same everywhere if you were to fly. Interstate highways don't look too different from each other, but on Amtrak you can really sit back and relax and see some of the really amazing changing landscapes. Starting out in the Midwest in Chicago by the lake and then heading on down to the Southwest. It's really amazing to watch that scenery change before your eyes. It's definitely an amazing experience there. before we have you reach the Grand Canyon. And as I mentioned on the previous trip, we do include a tour for you of the Grand Canyon on this one as well. The tour guides, everyone, they're absolutely fantastic. They're typically local to the area or have lived there many years. They'll tell you about all of the history of how the canyon was formed, the significance to the native peoples. They're really funny guys as well. So I definitely recommend taking that tour there of the Grand Canyon. And then you'll have free time as well. So there's some amazing hiking trails there, as well as some little museums, some really interesting shops. It's a great area, the Grand Canyon Village and the Grand Canyon itself. And then you'll take the train to Los Angeles. And as I mentioned, you can see the Hollywood sign. You can also go out to Santa Monica Pier, to the beach there. You can see some of the amazing palm trees. The observatories there in Los Angeles as well. Lots to see and do there in sunny Southern California before you board the Coast Starlight train to head up to San Francisco. Now, the Coast Starlight train, everyone, is one of Amtrak's most beautiful routes. You can see it there in the photo. It really hugs the California coast all throughout Southern California. And I was actually lucky enough to be on this trip quite recently and met with a gentleman who is from California, has lived there his whole life, and he was glued to the window. He couldn't believe some of the scenery he was seeing because he's never seen it before, even though he's a Southern California native. Because as you can see in that photo, the road, it doesn't come anywhere near this vista. You know, it's really incredible. This Coast Starlight train as well, it's a fun train to be on. They've got a Pacific Parlor car for anybody who takes business or one of the upgraded classes on the train. It's a parlor car just for you folks, where they have, you know, wine tasting and things like that, because the train is going to head inland and go through some of California's beautiful fertile wine regions in Central California on its way up to San Francisco. And again, guys, San Francisco is one of my favorite cities in the USA. So much to do there. You know, there's the Golden Gate Bridge, as I mentioned before. Of course, that's the iconic image of San Francisco. But there's so many different neighborhoods in San Francisco. It's one of the oldest Chinatowns in the world. They've got some amazing cuisine there. They've got a Little Italy section of San Francisco as well that's got some really fantastic Italian foods. Just really, there's so many different things to do and see. Lombard Street, which is the longest and craziest street in America. I don't recommend trying to drive down it. Take your life in your hands anyway. But you can visit it on the hop-on, hop-off trolley that we include. And then, of course, it's a great jumping-off point. If you did want to extend your stay a little, you can visit Napa and Sonoma, as we saw. You can visit Yosemite National Park, or the Muir Woods, or just outside San Francisco. Amazing, beautiful scenery there as well. So this trip, the coast to coast across the USA, does include, of course, as we've talked about, your flights, your transfers, your train travel, your hotel stays, some meals for you, as well as all of those sightseeing activities. Now, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but these, as I said, are professionally planned trips for you. We try and think of everything, but they are customizable as well. So if you're seeing this trip and it appeals to you, but you think, I'd really like some more nights in San Francisco at the end, or what if I stopped here or there, these can be tailor-made exactly how you'd like them. This coast-to-coast trip does include, as I say, the hop-on, hop-off buses in a lot of the cities. It includes admission to the Empire State Building or the top of Rockefeller Center, as well as the statue out to the ferry out to the Statue of Liberty, excuse me. Then when you're in Washington, D.C., it includes the Monuments by Moonlight tour, as well as the tour there in the Grand Canyon. Now, for you folks who have a little less time in your hands, can't quite make that 17-day trip at this time, but you do want to visit some of the great U.S. cities, we do have a trip here that's New York City and Washington, D.C., which is really nice, actually, because it gives you a little bit more time in each destination. So you do 3 nights in New York and then 3 nights in Washington, D.C. New York we've talked about, but highly recommend the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island Museum. It's really quite fascinating. This trip actually does include a Broadway show for you, so you can take your pick of all the different hit shows on Broadway, and there's new things coming, you know, every season there. Before you take the train on down to Washington, D.C. And as I mentioned, Washington has some amazing history there. If you folks were to travel in the springtime, cherry blossom season is in the springtime, typically around April. As you can see in this photo here, it's absolutely stunning scenery there in Washington at that time of year. One of my favorite things in Washington, D.C. is our Monuments by Moonlight tour, which I touched on a moment ago. That is included here for you in this trip. Now what that is, every evening, Washington, D.C., as the sun goes down, lights up its monuments. So the Washington Monument, the Jefferson Memorial, all of these, the White House, of course, the Capitol building, all these famous buildings are beautifully lit up at night. And the Monuments by Moonlight tour is actually an after-dark tour that'll take you to visit many of these spectacular buildings. And it's really just a different view of the city, and I think it's one that's really spectacular. So we do include that on this trip as well. So this, of course, has your flights, airport transfers, your Amtrak train between Washington and New York, and 6-night hotel stay, 3 in New York and 3 in Washington, D.C. It also includes, because you have a little more time in each city, you can do the hop-on, hop-off as well as the city pass. So for New York City, again, you can visit the Empire State Building, the Museum of Natural History, the Guggenheim, the Statue of Liberty. There's so many different options for you with these New York City pass combinations. We do include the tickets to the Broadway show, as I mentioned. And then in Washington, you do get that hop-on, hop-off so that you can visit during the daytime, as well as the Monuments by Moonlight tour. One other fun fact about Washington, D.C., it is the home to the Smithsonian Museums, which you could easily get lost for a day or more in just one of them, and there are several there as well. Now, I just want to remind everybody, as I mentioned before, these trips are customizable. They're tailored. We can tailor-make them however you like, and we have so many more than I had time for today. So today we focused just on some of our most popular itineraries, but we have so many more. For example, you could visit New York and my hometown of Boston. I definitely recommend that one. We also have Washington, D.C., New York, and Niagara Falls. We have trips to Philadelphia. We have trips down south to Charleston, South Carolina, Savannah, Georgia. Anywhere that you can think of in the U.S., we can really get you to by Amtrak. We have Yellowstone National Park, Yosemite National Park. There's so many other trips that we didn't have time to cover today. So definitely, if you're interested at all, visit our website here at Railbookers. Call us. Our consultants are more than happy to help you plan your itinerary. Now, I do, before I finish, just want to talk a little bit about what it's like to travel on Amtrak. So we've looked at some of the amazing destinations that we can visit, but we haven't talked too much about the train ride itself. And I think that really is one of the highlights of these trips here in the U.S. is traveling on board Amtrak, because it's so comfortable and it's such a fun way to travel. So as you can see, the basic way to travel there on Amtrak is in the coach accommodations. So any of your short trips, New York City to Washington, for example, will be in coach. Very comfortable. I always sort of dislike the term coach because I think it makes you think of a cramped seat on an airline, but that's not the case at all on Amtrak. As you can see in the photo there, there is plenty of legroom. It's just 2 seats and then the aisle and then 2 seats, so you're never in that dreaded middle seat situation. Of course, you've got tray tables, outlets. Many of the trains on Amtrak have Wi-Fi, not all, but many of them do. Certainly the Northeast Regional between New York and Washington does for sure. The seats do recline back about 45 degrees, so very comfortable, and they typically do have a little footrest as well. But if you folks did want to look into something a little more private for those overnight trips, so Chicago to the Grand Canyon, for example, we do have sleeping cabins available on board Amtrak as well. The first one I want to mention is the roomette. The roomette is probably the best value. It's what I usually travel in when I travel on Amtrak. As you can see there, it's 2 seats across from each other with a big, beautiful picture window. You've got a tray table, you've got climate control, you've got outlets in your roomette as well. It is a little private cabin, so you can close the door and be closed off from the world. Now, in the evening, those seats will fold down into bunk beds for you for sleeping. And no matter which sleeper you take, you do have an attendant there, a sleeper car attendant who just manages the folks in that car that you happen to be in. So he or she is a fantastic resource for you. They can tell you about the area that you're traveling through. They'll fold those down and make them up for sleeping in the evening, and then put them back to seats for you for sitting during the day. Of course, if you do want a little bit more space, Amtrak does have a more deluxe option as well. These are called the bedrooms. Really, these are a love seat where 2 people can sit next to each other, as well as a freestanding chair, as you see in the photo. The great feature about the bedrooms is that, of course, you do have a little bit more space, but you also have your own little washroom. So you've got a sink and then a little toilet and shower stall as well, private to you in your room. With the roomettes, the smaller accommodations, you do have full-size restrooms and showers, several of them just down the hall for you to use, and those are only shared by the other folks in your sleeper cabin. And the attendant is responsible. They'll make sure everything's nice and fresh for you. But the bedroom does include your own little private washroom, so that's a nice feature, especially for some of those longer journeys that you might be making. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the dining on board Amtrak, because that's one of my favorite parts of traveling on Amtrak is the dining car. So anyone, folks, on a long-distance train, so Southwest Chief, California Zephyr, Coast Starlight, any of these long-distance trains that we've looked at, they will have a full-service dining car on board the train. And these meals are prepared fresh to order on board the train when you're dining there. If you do have the sleeping accommodations, so let's say you take a roomette or a bedroom, all of the meals are included for you on your trip, which is a very nice feature. And they'll have breakfast, lunch, and dinner menus. So you can get, hamburger at lunch and then move on to the steak for dinner. I can personally recommend that. It was excellent, perfectly cooked. They do have vegetarian options if you are a vegetarian. And if you have any other dietary restrictions, just inquire with us. We can definitely see what they can do for you there on Amtrak. And as I say, they are some really nice meals for you. As well, Amtrak does have a cafe car, so if you wanted a snack in the middle of the day in between meals, you can head on down to the cafe, grab a salad or a muffin or coffee or anything like that. And of course, these long-distance trains do have the observation car as well, which I did mention before. Basically, it's a whole car full of big, comfy chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows, outlets. You can play cards, you can watch a movie on your laptop, or you can just watch the scenery roll by. So it's a very comfortable experience traveling on board Amtrak, and it's a really unique and different way to travel. So I think it's a lot of fun there. That's about all I've got time for on my segment here, guys. Thank you so much for listening about some of the great trips we have in the USA. And I'm going to go ahead now and turn it back over to Sarah to get to the exciting part, our winners and more.
Thank you very much, Colleen. Guys, I hope you enjoyed hearing all about that as much as I did. Some truly amazing sounding trips throughout the USA that we've heard about today, and some great info on what it's really like to travel on Amtrak as well. I've done so myself, and it is such a bucket list experience. Truly is fantastic. So just a quick recap from me. Where do we go? Obviously Europe, all over Europe by train. The USA, Colleen has done such a great job of igniting my wanderlust with USA train travel for sure. And Canada as well. Some great trips, some really amazing experiences there. And you guys know by now, the scenic rail journeys, they really are bread and butter, but city breaks, those luxury journeys, anytime you want to add a cruise on, we've got some really fantastic new options for that. Lakes and mountains, just a snippet of some of the scenery that our guests love the most. And that coast to coast USA trip, didn't that look amazing? And we've got a Canada one as well that you can do. These are some of the destinations that we're seeing, either enduringly popular ones like Italy and Switzerland, or real rising stars like Scandinavia. Some great train travel to undertake there, and Germany as well, which is very, very popular at the moment. Of course, you can see the USA and Canada. It's what this webinar is about, and it is one of our favorites and our customers' favorites as well. Just would be great to chat to you guys about a couple of our most popular itineraries at the moment. This Cologne and Berlin trip is really, really rising in popularity. You can see it's a trip from London. You're going to change in Brussels, a couple of nights each in Cologne and Berlin. The trains are so quick, so smooth. It's just the only way to sort of get this multi-city break in and visit two of Germany's and Europe's most iconic cities. It's absolutely fantastic. You can see the Brandenburg Gate there, just a snippet of what you'll see in Berlin. And if you're planning your summer holiday for next year, I know I am already desperate thinking about where I'm going to get away to try and get some sunshine. One thing that's really popular at the moment is Madrid and Andalusia, so the south of Spain. going to visit Granada, Cordoba and Seville on some really lovely high-speed Spanish trains. And so you'll see the Alhambra in Granada, Mesquita in Cordoba, you know, some absolutely iconic sites, all with some very, very lovely journeys through hopefully stunning Spanish landscapes along the way. And the classic Glacier and Venina Express. If you're a bit of a train buff like I am, like we all are here, you'll no doubt have heard about these trains before. They are two incredible panoramic trains that run through Switzerland. Massive panoramic windows. You're going to see just unrivaled scenery. I mean, that's a picture of the famous Landwasser Viaduct. You can see just how incredible this scenery is, the lakes and mountains that you'll pass. Completely different in the winter and the summer too, if you want kind of a winter wonderland theme, or if you want to see it, you know, see the country in the sun in the spring or the summer. Both are absolutely amazing. And Colleen has spoken to you guys about a USA coast-to-coast trip, but I've just got to mention the Canada coast-to-coast journey that we offer. It is absolutely amazing. If you love traveling by rail, if you really want to get the most that you'll see from the windows, just see a great part of the world. And, you know, the roads just don't go near these tracks, as Colleen said. Same for Canada as in the USA. You'll spend a few nights in Halifax, in Quebec, Montreal, the French-speaking regions. Of course, we'll include a trip to Niagara Falls for you. If you've never been, it is honestly breathtaking. Just majestic waterfalls that are absolutely fantastic. You'll see Toronto, you know, completely cosmopolitan, and then take the train for 3 nights across the country. What a wonderful, wonderful trip this is. I can tell you from experience, it is some of the best scenery in the world. Honestly, I couldn't do it justice. You know, you'll stay in Jasper, you'll take a trip out to Banff, see the national parks, end in Vancouver. This honestly is the trip of a lifetime if you've got a special occasion perhaps, or you know, you've just got a real appetite for an epic adventure by rail. I can definitely recommend this one. And of course, I can't not mention the Venice Samplon Orient Express, one of our bestsellers, one of our customers' favorites, perhaps the most luxurious train journey in the world. Perhaps if you've got a big birthday coming up next year or a wedding anniversary, this is something that, you know, it's unparalleled throughout the world. Both in what you're going to see, the scenery is absolutely amazing, the service, the dining, the opulent sleeping cars. I mean, I'm sure that the train's reputation does precede it, and it is definitely worth all of the praise and the hype that is heaped upon it. This is, you know, a journey for your bucket list. It's one to save up for. Absolutely phenomenal trip. Okay, fantastic. So this is the moment that I'm sure you've all been waiting for, and I'm really happy to announce 2 winners today. Is our special Christmas offer. So our winners today are going to be Caroline Livingston and Peter Greensmith. So congratulations to both of you, Caroline and Peter. We will be in touch with the details of your prize, and you'll both get £50 off your next rail holiday with us. So maybe that's a trip that you've seen today, or maybe it's, you know, one that you've had on the back burner for a while, but we're very excited to get to help you plan it and to give you this offer as well. And of course, an exclusive attendee discount for everybody who has listened to the webinar today, and the turnout has been phenomenal today. We're so pleased. Every single person is going to get £25 off their next rail holiday. And Caroline and Peter, this is combinable as well, so you'll get both. All you have to do is book your trip by the 31st of December, jot down that promo code RB Webinar Deck, so Railbookers Webinar December, and your travel consultant will be really happy to apply that discount for you. And how do you book? It's a great question. Call one of our travel consultants on 0203 780 2382. We're open Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. until 8 p.m. and then Saturdays as well from 10 till 3:30. So hopefully there'll always be somebody there who can chat with you about, you know, maybe give you some inspiration or talk you through your options. I know our travel consultants are really, really excited to talk and plan these holidays with you. So, whenever's convenient for you, just give us a ring and we'll get planning. And that is it from me. So thank you very, very much for joining us. We've had an abundance of questions today, really, really great questions from you guys. We're not going to get a chance to answer even nearly all of them, I'm sorry, but don't worry if you've asked a question. Somebody from our office will be in touch with you to have a chat and to make sure that you get the answer that you need. We'll have time for a few now, so I'll ask, and I'm sure Colleen will be more than happy to give you guys the answers. So we've got a question from Nigel, who is asking, I think he's interested in one of the long distance trips. Says, when can he book his holiday, Colleen?
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Nigel. That's a fantastic question. And I have great news. So all of these trips that we were looking at today are available now all the way through the beginning of 2018. So whether you're planning a trip for the upcoming summer, the spring, fall, winter, next spring, you can actually plan that all the way through towards about the middle of 2018, and we can book those for you now.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Not just for next year, but for 2018 as well. So do give us a call and we'll see what we can do for you. Let me find some of the questions. Some really great questions today. Anne has asked, are the sleeper accommodations available on all of the trips that we've seen today?
Oh, excellent. Excellent question. So basically, almost yes. The way it works is any of the short distance trains, the little short ones from New York City to Washington, D.C., for example, those ones don't have the sleeping accommodations available because they're just a few hours long. But any of the long distance journeys, so the Southwest Chief from Chicago to the Grand Canyon to Los Angeles, or the California Zephyr from Chicago to Denver through the Rocky Mountains to San Francisco, the Coast Starlight on up, from LA to San Francisco, even though that's not an overnight on that segment, that train does go all the way to Seattle, so that's considered a long distance train as well. On any of those trains, we do have the roomettes and the bedrooms available for you. If you're interested in that, we can certainly get those upgrades for you, but they are limited, so there's just a few sleeping cabins on each train, so certainly if that's something you're interested in, do let us know.
Yeah, brilliant, absolutely. And, on those long-distance trains, well worth the upgrade to get all your food included as well, and just the optimum comfort for the long-distance journeys. And one last question I think we've got time for. We've got a question from Angela. I think she's interested in the Music Cities trip, Nashville, Memphis, New Orleans, which is amazing. I've done that one myself. And she said she wants to do the trip, but can she extend her stay in New Orleans at the end? She wants to stay for a bit longer.
Oh, perfect. Absolutely, you can extend the trip in New Orleans. So all of these trips, folks, are customizable. They're tailor-made for you. So if you want to add extra nights at the end, at the beginning, you think it might be fun to visit another city in the middle, definitely just let us know. Any of our travel consultants can put that together for you.
Yep, absolutely they can. Okay, guys, I think that's probably all that we've got time for this afternoon. But thank you so much for taking time out of your afternoons to listen to us and to let us share some of these amazing trips that we're so excited about. It has been an absolute pleasure. And all that's left for me to say is goodbye and thanks.
Thank you guys, everybody, so much for listening, and have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, very Merry Christmas now that it's December, and we'll see you next time.